we're going to bring our animations together. So we can right click on here. We want to go to animation again, and we want to select animation blueprint. So here we have a couple of things that we can do, like if you want to animate vehicles or tutorials, but we're going to stick with animation instance. So we select animation instance, select our skeleton, hit OK, and we can name this character animation BP for blueprint. So now what we do with this, we can double click on that and it should open a graph, an animation graph. And this is where we will organize our animations, what order they will play in, when they will play. Here we have two different things. We have an animation graph and an event graph. An event graph is going to, essentially we're going to update all of the variables that we will create in the animation graph. And the animation graph will determine the order in which some of the animations are played and set some of those conditions. To get started, we can right click anywhere on the graph. You can zoom in, zoom out if you want more space. And we're going to search for a state machine. Or we're going to add new state machine. And we're going to connect this little guy to this other little guy. And we can name the state machine locomotion. You know, to show that it's, so we know that it's for our movement. If you double click on that, it should take you to this page, this other graph, and you can move between graphs up here. There's a hierarchy here, and you can move in and out of the different nodes. When you're in this window, after coming from locomotion, we have this entry. From entry, we can just click, drag, add a state, and we'll call this our idle, walk, run. So now what we want to do here, this is our starting point, our starting state. You can double click on this. Then it'll take us to here. Here, this is where we're going to want to add our blend space. So if you remember, we called it our idle, walk, run. We want to bring this blend space in, take this little guy and connect it to the final animation pose. And notice here that we have the speed variable in which our blend space is based on. In order so we don't have to come back to this box every time we want to change the speed of the character, we can right click on this. We want to make this a variable instead of a fixed value. So we right click on speed and promote to variable. And let's just call this variable, for the sake of simplicity, speed. Or consistency. So now that we have our starting state, we can come back up to locomotion, to our state machine, and we can add an arrow from here, add a new state. We'll call this jump. All right, so no matter if you're standing still, walking, or running, you should be able to jump. So in our jump, we double click on it. You want to bring in our jump animation, our jump start. It's going to be the start of our jump, and we want to connect it. Nice and simple. However, this poses a problem because we can't always jump, right? If you're in the middle of the air, you can't jump unless you want to add a double jump to your game, but we're not going to do that here. So if we go back to locomotion, we can double click on this transition. And this transition allows us to make the rules for the transition conditions, in other words. So this will allow us to set that. Here we can create a Boolean by dragging this back, promoting to variable, and we're going to name this is underscore in underscore air. And this will tell us if it's in the air. And now that we have our jump, we can repeat that for our jump loop, which is what will happen, the animation that'll play when our character is in the air. So we can name this jump loop. And again, we do the same thing. We go here, we want to add our animation. Should be third person jump loop. Under animation. And we can connect it. Cool. And again, we need to set conditions for when this will start playing. So what we're going to do here is double click on that transition, right click on anywhere on the graph. We're going to add a ratio. The time, lookup time remaining, ratio, third person jump start. So this will tell us how much time there is left in the other animation. And we want to make sure that it is less than 0.1. So this tells us if there's 10% of the previous animation left to play, then it will start to play our jump loop. Now that we have our jump loop, we can make our jump end. We can add a state. This will be the end of our jump. Again, double click on that. Add our jump end and connect it. Oh, and connect it. And between our jump loop and our jump end, what's going to cause it to play the jump end is, of course, if it is not in the air. So we can get is in. We can drag it from our variables, get it, do not, and connect it. Can go back to our state machine, connect jump end to the idle so that when he's done jumping, he'll go back to being idle, walking or running. And here we can do what we did before in the ratio. And we're going to set this to 0.1 again. So that about does it for our state machine. And we can move from an animation graph to our event graph. So Unreal Engine likes to start you off with this event blueprint animation, which is pretty much what we'll be starting with. However, we also want to add a try get pawn owner. So a pawn in Unreal Engine is essentially a character, and this will refer to our character. So the event graph, like I said before, is where we are going to update all our variables that are all our variables, whether it's it's in the air or speed. From event blueprint update animation, we can click and drag from the white arrow, and we want to add an is valid node. So what this will tell us is if there is a character, if our input is valid, it'll check if we have a character, so that we do not overflow our input log. We're not just, if we type something in, it won't add to it. It'll check for valid input, and we want to connect our owner to here. Our pawn owner to is valid, so we're checking if it is or if it's not valid. If there is a character or not. So from here, from the pawn owner node, we'll make another link. And what we want to do is add a get movement component. So from our isValid node, we want to be able to set our two variables that from before, speed and to check if it's in the air. So we'll start with the air. So we go to variables, default set is in air. And then from here we can extend this. We can look for our speed variable, set speed. And we'll come back to this in a bit. So going back to try get pawn owner, we take our return value, we click drag, and we want to get its move component. So we can go get move component, give movement component, and attach it. From here, we can check if he's falling using a built-in Unreal function called is falling. And we can use this return value to set this boolean. So now if our character is falling or in the air, it will check this boolean variable. So now we have to set up our speed, because we can't have speed just be 0 all the time. So we go here, we make another extension here. But instead of getting the movement, we want to get the velocity. So we can get velocity. And because speed is a scalar value and velocity is a vector, we only care about the vector length of the velocity and not the direction. So we can add another node here. We can get vector length. And from here, that can set our speed variable. And now our event graph and our animation graph are both ready. Notice here it says preview out of date, click to recompile. To compile it, we go to the top left, hit compile, we should have save, and this should happen in your event graph, meaning that it is working.